Chapter 35, Apotheosis. Nyoka's stronghold under Mount Amdut, 338 solar year. Alinda was overwhelmed. She looked at Nyoka on the other side of the room and still couldn't believe it. The old priest was in a body that looked just like hers and Syra's. It was like looking in a mirror, and that fact terrified her. Not to mention that the purple glowing was fading more and more, and the exposed flesh of the royal clone was becoming more apparent once again. This made Alinda feel very awkward as she suddenly became very aware of her own body. Meanwhile, Hido had regrouped next to his master, who was now done glowing. The undead priest turned toward his lord and smiled, exposing his sharp fangs while the half-moon rune shone brightly on his right hand. "My lord, or should I say, my goddess. Your enemies have all gathered as you knew they would. Allow me the honor of bringing you a great blood sacrifice to welcome your apotheosis into godhood." Nyoka nodded as to say, "So be it." The chief monk raised his right arm, letting the child of the moon rune shine forth with its unnatural power. The dead monks that Laszlo had killed earlier suddenly rose to their feet under the command of the lunar runic power. They were reanimated flesh and were eyeing Rose and the Phalan's sisters. The ancient magician extended his hand. The elegant priestly garb his former vessel had been wearing rose off the ground along with the wizard's rod. The rod came to rest in his hand while the garments started spinning around him. There was a flash of light and they now clothed the formerly bare female vessel. Though they were a bit big on him in this new body. Nyoka gave his last surviving follower the signal and the vampire gave the order to his own undead followers to attack. The newly birthed vessel turned its back on the fighting and headed toward the altar. He was about to place his hands on the orbs containing the two twin runes, when a wave of glowing green magic came out of nowhere, pushing the young female body off the side of the altar. Nyoka looked up to Simeon, who had finished casting his wind rune. He and Ursh were now poised to stop him at all costs. Laszlo, meanwhile, had made a straight line for Alinda once he saw that the undead monks were going for her and the others. "Thou shalt not stop my ascension again, foolish sister. I shalt becometh divine." Nyoka roared in his new tone of two voices speaking concurrently. "Ursh shall not fail again, brother," yelled the small wizard from her own vessel's body. "Slave of my half-moon rune, slay these interlopers." He countered. The newborn vampire stepped forward and thrusted out his own staff, channeling his rune through it. Both magicians channeled their powerful runic spells into their own rods and fired runic attacks back at him, simultaneously. The energy clashed in a dazzling light show, sending all three to the ground for cover. Concurrently, Laszlo started to fight the undead. Rose had already begun battle with them, having already defeated two of them. "I wish I had a sword or rune or something. Damn it, I hate standing here doing nothing," lamented Syra, who was standing off to the side with her sister. Alinda was afraid, but she also was tired of feeling powerless too. She wanted to do something to help, but she didn't know what. Abruptly, a zombie came right toward Alinda. Syra, however, pushed the reanimated monk backwards. Laszlo extended his right sword while running at the now falling zombie. His razor-sharp blade sliced right through his undead opponent's back like a shish kebab. Impaled by his one blade, Laszlo brought his other one up, swinging with one swift motion, and decapitated the creature. Withdrawing his sword, the body crumbled to the ground alongside the rest of it. Alinda leapt at Laszlo's chest and hugged him tightly. There was so much she wanted to say, but now wasn't the time. Laszlo couldn't return the hug. Syra grabbed her sister and pulled them apart. Laszlo said nothing. He just smiled for a moment, before he saw Rose in trouble. She was being attacked by 6 zombies at once. That's how she didn't notice the one that snuck up on her charge. Each undead monk was slapping at her with their claw-like hands. She kept beating them away with her swinging ivory-handled weapons. They were so close to her, she had no room to get enough swinging arc on her nunchucks, one of the few flaws in her weapon of choice. Taking both his blades, Laszlo lifted them in the air so that the blade tips were pointing downwards behind his back, while the bottom of his hilts were pointing upward parallel with his head. He brought his arms back down violently and released the weapons, which went flying and spinning through the air. The dual swords hit their target as both blades went slicing through the back of a zombie that was surrounding her. They hit the creature with such force that it pinned the fiend to the ground as the point of the weapons came to rest in on the stone floor. "Get out of there!" yelled Laszlo, who had been channeling his own true rune since he had thrown his weapons. Laszlo had made her a temporary escape route. So, Rose darted for the gap in the forces. She beat two zombies in the head on either side of her as she passed through the hole. At the same moment, Laszlo unleashed his favorite attack, double-edged sword. The symbol of the rune of punishment appeared above Laszlo's extended left arm. Next, purple, green, and crimson beams of light started to shine and swirl around the fearless warrior. The whole area around the zombies grew dark and hazy as an ominous and foreboding fog materialized around them. As this cloud enveloped the rest of them, suddenly glowing red swords appeared magically in the undead beings. The swords pierced them quickly in a loud popping sound followed by an unholy scream. As quickly as each sword had appeared, it vanished just the same. Thus, each zombie was once again lifeless on the ground, defeated. Everything became eerily quiet in the room for a few moments. Suddenly, there was a bright flash of blue and orange light coming from the altar. Nyoka had done it. The ancient being had managed to place both hands on the orbs containing the Twilight and Dawn runes. As Laszlo had distracted Nyoka while the girls were freed. Now Nyoka had countered with his own distraction. By threatening their lives, Laszlo had taken his eye off his enemy in order to rescue his friends. Nyoka had not let this good deed go unpunished. His prior hunch was right. Their blood did indeed allow him to overcome the ancient's protection charms. Both runes took to their new host with no resistance of their own free will, believing her to be a member of the Falanin royal family and an ideal and powerful host. He started to laugh with twisted glee and delight. "I can feel it. The power of the Dawn rune is healing not only my soul, but the damage done to this vessel already inflicted by it. Amazing. I can feel the darkness that was once trying to take my soul is now beginning to retreat. And the Twilight rune, my old friend. How I have hungered to taste your destructive power once again coursing through my body. One more step and I shall become a god, indeed." "Why is he speaking so normal now?" asked Rose. "I mean she or he, or whatever, still sounds super creepy with those two voices of his. But the way he is talking, it sounds so normal and modern." "I think the two solar runes are not only healing his body and soul, but his mind as well. He's probably speaking properly, because his mind is no longer so badly decayed," speculated Syra, recalling what she had been told about the healing powers of the Dawn rune, when she had had it placed in her body nearly a year ago. "Go, Master. Summon the Sun rune. Complete your apotheosis. Ascend into godhood. I shall not let these unclean ones stop you. Your servants shall rise again. Awaken," bellowed Hido, on his feet once more and channeling the half-moon rune. Life again bristled in the undead monks. Their flesh was nearly gone thanks to Laszlo's magical attack. Bones and muscles could be seen where skin had once been. It made all three women want to throw up because of how disgusting it was. Repulsed, Rose still said to Laszlo, "I'll deal with them properly this time. Stop that crazy guy, already." Laszlo replied, "You sure you will be okay?" The Queen's Knight drew her two weapons from her side and assumed a proper fighting stance. She merely smiled a happy grin. That was all he needed to know. The old sailor ran up to the reanimated zombie still pinned to the ground by his swords. He drew his weapons from the stone and its back. He, then, proceeded to kill the thing once more. The rest Rose can deal with, he thought. Laszlo approached the altar. There was Nyoka armed with two very powerful runes in a clone body that resembled the woman he loved. Nyoka was a full-blown wizard. Maybe, even greater than Warlock, he reasoned. Beating him would be a daunting trial, indeed. Simeon and Ursh were both back on their feet and were attacking Hido, who, like the three former generals, was giving form, tactics, and directions to the otherwise mindless and chaotic zombies. But, as the two magicians pressed their attacks of runic spells against him, the once chief monk had to divide his attention and efforts. Those beautiful blue eyes that the master of the rune of punishment had come to adore on Alinda's soft face were now staring back at him cold and haughty from Nyoka's new clone. The former high priest spoke once more with dual voices. I feel the very power of the sun in these two. Even some of the night rune resides in them as well. I feel it all. Their power is magnificent. But what is this I sense? I think their power can be combined. Oh my, the very power of creation. Laszlo could sense a huge power gathering around his foe. He wasted no time channeling a powerful attack of his own. Nyoka extended his arms in the air as the symbols of the bluish dawn rune and orangish twilight rune appeared over his head. Both runes seemed to overlap each other like a colorful twisted yin-yang symbol as each rune complemented the other's symbol. Without warning, a spectrum of color appeared all around the female clone with silver hair. The very colors of the rainbow all swirled around both her and Laszlo. Next, solid pillars of blue light appeared around only Laszlo, who had a feeling he knew what this meant. Those blue pillars exploded all around him with a brilliant and devastating orange explosion of pure power. Concurrently, the islander had cast his own attack, and while the rainbow of colors had formed around them both, Laszlo's own devastating attack, Everlasting Mercy, was appearing as well. The fluttering of wings could be heard as a green haze surrounded both spellcasters. White feathers began to appear and fall out of the ceiling like a soft rain as the pillars of blue lights formed from Nyoka's spell. Then, an angel appeared above Laszlo. This terrifying celestial being was pure white, clad in a golden armor on its chest. It had a strange-looking cloth that was wrapped around its waist and legs. Its wings were massive and loud with each flap. However, the scariest thing about this angel was that it was missing a head as well as a left arm and leg. Conversely, the right arm and leg were both intact. The angel extended its own good arm as waves of feathers and pure power came bursting forth directed right at Nyoka before it vanished into nothingness. An unholy scream accompanied this attack as well. The two extremely devastating magic attacks began to shake the whole temple they were fighting in as their powers collided like a meteor strike. Dust and debris began shaking free from the ceiling, which Alinda feared might collapse on them all. She and Syra took cover behind one of the pillars they used earlier, hoping its stronger material wouldn't collapse on them. The zombies cared about no such thing like falling rocks. So, Rose was forced to remain fighting the four she had not yet defeated from the original dozen. Likewise, Ursh and Simeon remained in harm's way. They were pressing the new advantage they were gaining against the vampire. The former chief monk was growing tired from fighting them and coordinating his zombies' attacks on Rose. As the powerful explosion from both Titanic-level spells collided, Laszlo prepared himself. The solar magic attack started to burn him greatly. However, the feathers from his angel were still following on his body, healing him. Moreover, he had directed the headless angel to heal Simeon and Ursh as well. The spell did just the trick too, as their exhausted bodies needed a quick refreshing. The cherub's overwhelming force of power normally vaporized most of its targets instantly, or at least greatly damaged them. But Laszlo was at a loss, when he saw Nyoka completely unharmed by his fourth and most powerful normal spell. Then it occurred to him. That creation spell from the combined Dawn and Twilight runes worked just like his own spell. It damaged foes and healed allies alike. Meaning that neither warrior's spells had done anything to the other at all. The two voices of Nyoka declared as one, "A nice warm-up, boy. You are truly deserving of that true rune of yours. But you still lack the discipline to use it to its fullest measure of magical power. You lack the abandonment and courage to go further and unlock its dark intentions. Regardless, no more games. Come to me, rune of the sun. I command you as the one who wields both the dawn and the twilight. Come to me. Make my transcendence into full deity complete. No! Yelled Laszlo as the moment he had feared had at last come to pass. Nyoka had summoned the Sun Rune, one of the 27 true runes. Heaven help us! Whispered Simeon. Has failed again. No, brother. Why? Muttered Unlike Laszlo, who had extended his healing spell to his friends, Nyoka had not been so generous with his toward Hido. His vampiric servant was barely holding on. He had to give up guiding the zombies in favor of combating and Simeon's powerful elemental spells. However, it was too late. Knowing they needed to finish this foe quickly and turn their attention to helping Laszlo with Nyoka, they took a page from Nyoka's own spellbook and combined some magic of their own. Using her Thunder Rune and Simeon's Fire Rune, they created the most powerful offensive attack of the elemental magics, Blazing Camp. A mini tornado of fire swept the room and swallowed the drained vampire whole as bolts of lightning appeared out of nowhere, striking the target in the inferno. When the spell was completed, the vampire collapsed to the ground, barely alive. The former monks stopped attacking and lost their power of reanimation. They fell over lifeless once more, much to an exhausted Rose's relief. Then a rather unusual thing happened. The half-moon rune removed itself from its nearly dead host and floated into the air. It shot up through the skylight in the middle of the room and out the side of the mountain to where no one, but itself, knew. The monk transformed from a vampire back into a mere human. He was whispering, "Master, remember your promise to me. Eternal life." The fallen servant drew his last breath. Simeon turned to and said, "Luckily, for us he and that rare lunar rune were not very compatible with each other. I think it went to him only out of necessity, not desire. I guess now it wants to look for a new host elsewhere." Nodded in agreement with his assessment. While all this had been occurring, Laszlo was trying something risky. He was channeling and charging his true rune with a force of power much greater than his everlasting mercy spell. This was part of his rune's greatest power. It was the kind of epic power he had used in the past to destroy whole fleets of ships and the fortress of Elil when its giant rune cannon exploded. Now he would turn this awesome power against Nyoka. His help would be to destroy the temple, crushing them both under tons of rocks before the Sun Rune could arrive. It was suicide and he knew it. He didn't care. Nyoka had to be stopped here and now, and this was all he could think of on such a quick notice. Nyoka suddenly barricaded himself in a purple shield similar to before. However, this shield was more powerful as it was, also, using the power of the twin runes to reinforce it. The islander figured he was biding his time until the Sun Rune arrived here, having to travel the great distance from the Sun Palace. Plus, since the Ancient Four had seen Laszlo channeling his great power, he wasn't about to take any chances of dying so close to reaching his apotheosis. He had waited all these centuries. He could wait a few more minutes, he told himself. Laszlo glanced back at Simeon. He didn't have to say anything. The old wizard knew precisely what the islander was intending to accomplish. The two men merely nodded and that said it all. The wizard knew what he had to do and gestured to urge that it's time to go. She hesitated for a moment, looking at Laszlo, then Nyoka, then back at Laszlo. She lifted the end of her robe and started running with Simeon toward the girls. Rose was exhausted. So, Simeon handed her a mega medicine herb and she recovered much of her strength fairly quickly after eating it. "We need to go now. The Sun Rune will be here any moment. When that happens, Nyoka will be pretty much unstoppable with the true rune, the twin solar runes, and his own natural prodigious magical abilities. He'll become something like a demigod. We must leave. So, Laszlo can unleash his powerful attack on him before all that happens," he concluded. These words didn't fall to the ground for any of them. They all understood what Laszlo was about to do. The sacrifice he was about to make. Alinda could feel her heart breaking anew. "He's a true rune bearer, right?" asked Rose. "I thought he was supposed to be immortal. Even a collapsing building wouldn't kill him, would it?" Shook her head. "Comrade Laszlo is strong. True rune bearer he is. But he is not invincible," Only ageless? Survive? No, Ush thinks probably not, which is his plan. He will create an attack so powerful it will kill Comrade Laszlo and Brother Nyoka, both. No more conversations. We need to go, now. Simeon said as he turned toward Rose. She got his meaning. She grabbed an emotionally exhausted Alinda's wrist and as before was pulling her toward the door. Syra was not resisting this time. She, in fact, had Alinda's other arm and was helping Rose. The younger princess went limp. She was so overwhelmed she didn't know what to do. Her insides were screaming out to stay with him, but her body was frozen with fear. They were just about to make it to the large door, when something like a fireball came crashing through the roof, shaking the whole mountainside as it did so. It was small and glowing like a fiery furnace. It was the Sun Rune. The true rune hovered over the cloned Falanin royal family member as the whole room started shaking again. When the true rune had burst through the roof, it had entered where a support pillar stood. That broken pillar began falling over and struck another pillar as it did so. In moments, a cascade effect was taking place to all the pillars on the left side of the grand hall of the king's chamber. One pillar would crash into the nearby one, knocking it over as well. Thus, one by one they knocked each other over like dominoes. They all moved back as the left pillar closest to the door fell over, to the regret of them all. The large marble pillar now blocked the only way out of the room. Since the secret door had been magically sealed by Nyoka, the left side of the chamber started collapsing in on itself without any support beams, but the right side was still intact for the moment. The pillar that was now blocking the doorway wasn't long enough to strike its right neighbor, as the gap between them was wider since the ancient builders had left more space for the large doors in the center of the hall. Laszlo, still channeling, saw all this happen before his eyes. He couldn't believe his bad luck. The Sun Rune was here, but he hesitated. He was prepared to die to stop Nyoka and save everyone. But his friends were still here and trapped. He couldn't kill his friends, especially Alinda. Even if it meant facing Nyoka at his full strength. The captain of the Dauntless remained channeling his true rune's power. Whatever happened next, he would be ready, he told himself. He just prayed it would be enough.